So I'm here again in the dog Zen den on a stormy winter morning in January 2020. And the topic of my little riff today is Buddhist bona fides. Now, of course, bona fides is a pure Latin term meaning good faith. So the direct translation is in good faith. Hey, is that a good translation? Yeah, normally one uses this term routinely to do something in good faith. It's an expression of the social contract of trust, which is particular to white folks. You might have noticed in a high trust society, all the transactions that occur on all levels of society throughout the hierarchies are conducted bona fides, in good faith. So I'm going to start with a question, which is simply, how come so much good faith is extended to Buddhist masters, lamas, rinpoches, tulkus, and so on? And not only good faith, but a great deal of reverence as well. But as you know, there's an old Tibetan proverb that says, where there is reverence, even a dog's tooth shines. In any case, the question of reverence would be the topic of another riff. Right now, I want to concentrate on this fact, this well-known and widely attested fact, that Buddhist masters presumed to be of some accomplishment in, what shall we say, in realization of the fundamental operations of mind, such individuals receive an enormous amount of good faith, and they are taken on good faith. I'd like to investigate why that is so and what is the basis of that faith. But to do so, I'm going to take a bit of a digression. I'm going to steer around another topic which I raised somewhere along the line. And by taking a look at that topic, by doing a bit of a recce around that topic, I'm going to come back to the question of, to put it in another way, why should anyone, or why would anyone, extend good faith to presumed Buddhist masters? So the topic I'm going to use to get to my final point here is one that I mentioned in the introductory talk, I believe, The Woke and the Wolf. I talked about a certain Buddhist master who is also an heir and representative of the Bon Po tradition of Tibet, and that would be Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And this dude is indeed alive and well today, and his book, Wonders of the Natural Mind, was printed in the year 2000. And I alluded to the fact, which I'll get back to when I talk about clear light and white light, that he describes quite graphically, rather graphically, the 5 signs that occur to those who practice Buddhist meditation. More specifically, it's dharana, which means concentration and retention. Dharana is the state of meditative concentration in which you retain the awareness of the primordial state and suppress or ignore or discard the productions that come from the primordial state. So, as the story goes, coming from presumed to be accomplished lamas, there are 5 signs that arise as you are reaching this point of attainment where you enter the clear light. And the descriptions given in Wonders of the Natural Mind are quite vivid, and I'll get back to them in that other talk. But for now, I'd like to point out something that I discovered recently, rummaging around in a box of dog toys, which I call my Buddhist collection. I found out that there is a Tantra, which is considered to be one of the oldest surviving Tantras. Now, what this means is ambiguous and vague and not really possible to determine. The evaluation of scholars regarding what is oldest in Buddhist text is a massive dog's breakfast. And yet, there are some convincing arguments. For instance, there are two scholars, Alex Wayman, W-A-Y-M-A-N, and Bentatosh Bhattacharya, who concur that this Tantra, called the Guhya Samaja, or Guhya Samaya Tantra, is probably one of the oldest, whatever that means. Does it mean that you have the oldest surviving textual evidence? You have the earliest references to it without a text equivalent to the date of the reference? It could mean many things, but let's just say that, let me just say that I'll accept, going into the game, that this text, the Guhya Samaya Tantra, has seniority and can be dated to around the time of the murder of Hypatia, that is to say, the late 3rd or early 4th century, or 5th century, what is it? Anyway, we're looking at, say, at least 1,600 years ago, 16 centuries. And it so happens that this text, by the way, the title means the secret vow, the Tantra of the secret vow. Guhya means secret, or hidden, esoteric, and Samaja, or Samaya, spelled with a Y or a J, means a vow or a commitment. So this is pretty esoteric stuff coming out of the realm of Tantric Buddhism. And you find in this text, as translated by Alex Wayman with elaborate footnotes, you find the original document elaborately translated, and you find a passage which describes the 5 signs that arise when one approaches the attainment of the full, clear, and free and steady realization of Rigpa, or the primordial clarity of mind. And so I'm going to read the passage. It's just one paragraph, just for the record. And then I'm going to proceed from there. So Wayman brings in the paragraph by introducing or focusing on the notion of retention. As I said, he gives it a capital R. That's dharana. It means that you have to be able to hold stable in the state that you have attained. And he calls that, this is Wayman's language, by the way, the true limit, capital T, capital L, the gnosis of the clear light. So he actually uses the word gnosis, but that's Wayman, the scholar. Then he cites the verse, quote, "When consciousness goes toward the diamond of cessation, the apprehension of signs arises. The diamond of cessation is the clear light. When consciousness has gone to it, it is born in it. The apprehension of signs, that is, the manifestation of signs, arises, that is, occurs as prior signs. Regarding the passage, the signs of the 5 realms have been explained by the diamond of enlightenment. The details are as follows. Through dissolution into water by earth in the performer's body, the aspect of a mirage manifests, the first sign. Through the dissolution of fire on the part of water, the aspect of smoke, the second sign. Through the dissolution into wind of fire, the aspect of fireflies, the third sign. Through the going into the three lights on the part of the subtle element, i.e., the wind, the self-existence of the set of lights like a lamp, the fourth sign. Through the sequential dissolution of the three prakriti lights, there is only the clear light, a lasting light like a cloudless sky, the fifth sign. Those 5 signs bring consciousness to nirvana. As the text says, first earth goes into water, water goes into fire, fire passes into wind, wind enters into perception, vishnana. Perception accompanied by retention, in turn, enters the clear light, always capitalized, capital C, capital L. Then the verse says, that firm thing, purified in the clear light, is as follows. By the Vajrapath, expansion of buddhi to the whole sentient world, that is, by entering the clear light preceded by the indispensable, non-evadable 5 signs, one should radiate, that is, pervade with the form of the Dhammakaya in the regions of the sky, that is, the worldly realms. That's the end of the passage. So you get the drift, or you get the rift, or you get the grift, whatever it is. These signs are called non-evadable. In other words, unless you have these, you must have these signs to reach the enlightened state. And unless you have these signs, you cannot know that you are reaching it. So here is some evidence of experimental mysticism in Buddhism. And let's presume the seniority of the Guhya Samaya Tantra, going back to around 400 AD. So over 16 centuries, this description of these states has remained entirely consistent. Now, when I get around to wonders of the natural mind, when I look into the question of how they regard the white light, which is the most intriguing aspect of Buddhist mysticism, I will show you that the description of the 5 signs in this book, published in the year 2000 by a presumed Tulku Buddhist master who's living today, is exactly the same as it was 1600 years ago. Exactly the same. So you can't fault the Buddhist scriptures and the Buddhist instructions regarding high-end meditation to attain Rigpa on inconsistency, can you? So why am I quoting this passage? Well, first of all, I want to demonstrate the consistency of their practices. And I want to make it clear that while I might once in a while lift my leg and piss on the Dharma wheel, I certainly respect their attainment such as it is. My question is, what exactly is their attainment? And my further question is, upon what grounds would anyone give good faith or assume good faith to them based on their attainment? You see, that association, that presumption, to me does not follow. Now, I can allow that there have been Buddhist masters through the last 16 centuries who followed rigorous practices, extremely difficult practices over long periods of time, and guided by other masters and other mystics and yogis of the same high discipline, they managed to achieve certain states which were confirmable amongst them, confirmable by these 5 signs in particular, and by many other aspects as well, and many other ways in which they confirmed among each other that their meditative practices were leading them to the desired state, the realization of the primordial clear light of Rigpa, and the retention of the light, or the retention of the condition of being in the light. As it says in this text, when you achieve the light at that level, when there is nothing but the light, then you enter in the light and you remain somehow in the light. Well, that raises the question to me, of course, is this state they're describing embodied or disembodied? If you are disembodied, well, let's talk about that. What does it mean to be disembodied? But if you are embodied in that state, what form does the embodiment take? So I have questions about the state itself. I'll pick them up in another riff. But having made that little recce around this topic, I'm going to swing back around to the opening question. I'm going to phrase it in a different way. Why would anyone presume that those who have actually attained this state, and let's give it to them, credit where credit is due, why would anyone presume that such individuals, such men, are especially qualified in any way whatsoever to pronounce upon the human condition, or to advise other normal human beings in normal affairs, or to do anything whatsoever? I would like someone to explain to me how the attainment of that state, the retention in Rigpa, qualifies the one who attains it to receive the bona fides of other people regarding anything but the attainment of that state. You see my question? I'll give it to them. It must be inconceivably difficult to achieve this state. And I have an argument that it is against nature to achieve this state. And it is a wrongful forcing of the power of the mind back upon itself, a wrongful application of the reflex function of mind, of the Vijnana. I can make an argument on that point. But let's just say, credit where credit is due, on their own terms, in their own sandbox. This is their achievement. This is their attainment. Fine. But why would anyone presume that men who have reached that attainment are qualified in any way to be held in good faith regarding their views on anything whatsoever, from ant colonies to the breastfeeding, to teenage sexuality, to how to sail a boat, or how to cook an omelet? Where do the qualifications come from? Or why would anyone presume that someone who's attained this state knows better? I think that's really the simplest way to put it. I think this is the clear and direct way to put it. Why would anyone assume that men who have attained that state know better about anything except the attainment of that state? Now, if they reserve themselves exclusively, if Buddhist teachers and masters reserve themselves to the discussion of the attainment of that state, and if they made it their high imperative and their exclusive telos, their exclusive objective, to bring others to that state, then you would have a one-pointed concentration of Buddhist teaching on that state. But you don't really have that. And to the extent that you do have that today, you don't have evidence that the teaching is being fulfilled, that it's actually achieving its stated aim to bring people to enlightenment. In large measure, what's coming forth from the Buddhists today and what has come forth from them for centuries is moralistic preaching about how people should behave, whining like the Jews about suffering, and a lot of other gabble and gibber and jibber-jabber that has absolutely nothing to do with the one-pointed objective of attaining enlightenment. So what is going on? And why would anyone listen to anything that a Buddhist teacher or master has to say if it is not directly focused on this topic of attaining the enlightened state? And hold on, because it gets worse. Even when they talk about attaining the enlightened state, or even when there is a text, such as the Guya Samaya text, they're not talking about it really transparently and disingenuously. For instance, if you read that text, it's not a first-person text. It's a text in a syntax of abstraction or distancing from the experience. So while on the one hand it claims to describe an extremely intimate and profound mystical experience, on the other hand, it describes it in a way that distances the practitioner. If the practitioner were explaining in an open and transparent way how to attain these states, then he would say, this is what I did, this is how I got the first sign, this is how it felt, this is where I was, this is when I lost the sense of my body. This is when I became disembodied, if that's what happens. This is when I retained or regained my embodiment. This is how I felt afterwards. This is the first meal I had afterwards. This is the first thing I saw when I came out of it. But they never, ever describe any of that, to my knowledge. Even Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who I'm going to quote as a more or less honest and ingenuous account for his more or less honest and ingenuous account, doesn't talk in the first person. And so there is this problem of disingenuousness, in my opinion. I think that it is dishonest. I think that the experimental mysticism of the Buddhist tradition is no different than any other kind of experimental mysticism, whether it be of the American Indians, of the Aborigines of Australia, of the Inuits, or of the Inuit or the Navajo, or of the Vedic yogis, or the masters of Chan and Zen. So you're just human animals having these experiences. Don't you think it would be beneficial if you explained in first person to others, if you really want to guide them toward the same experiences, just how it all happened and where you were and what you felt and what led into it and what led out of it and what emotions you felt? And get real behind all of this highfalutin, esoteric jargon. Now, in my view, and this is one of the conclusions from this talk, in the view of Lama Lovemut, if Buddhists are sincere in the one-pointed objective to bring others to enlightenment, and I doubt that they are, there is a lot of evidence that they're not today, but if they are, then I am going to be so bold as to prescribe to them how they should present the teaching of enlightenment. And this is how they should present it, in personal descriptive terms, in first-person flesh and blood terms, and come out and say, is the retention in Rigpa a disembodied state or not? If it's disembodied, describe exactly how you, the accomplished master, get into it and how you get out of it. And if it's not disembodied, then please, pray tell, describe to me how you can float in an ocean of clear light, in bliss, having some kind of sense of your embodiment in that condition. why don't you describe that to people if you really want to get them where you've been or where you are? That to me is a huge, huge question regarding the message and mission of Buddhism in the world today, and as it has been so through these many centuries. So that's one of my takeaway points for this little riff. The second point goes directly to the initial question: how come anyone would extend good faith to Buddhist masters regarding any other subject but the attainment that they are presumed to enjoy? One thing that you see everywhere where these Buddhists in robes, whether they be the Dalai Lama, one Rinpoche or another, whether they be Westerners in the robes, one thing that you see is the fawning and scraping, the bowing, the pandering, the smoozing that goes on endlessly among these people. Placing the palms of the hands together, raising them to the forehead, bowing. This is the typical behavior. This is a sign of reverence. But where there is reverence, even a dog's tooth shines. What is there to be reverent about? Suppose I'm standing in front of this Bonpo Buddhist master who has a foundation in the United States, I think. I'm standing in front of him or in front of some other Rinpoche. They're all petering out now. There's very few of them left. Some of them died under scandalous conditions, like Chogyal Rinpoche, so shameful that the Dalai Lama had to apologize for his behavior. That's another subject. But suppose that there's a real live one around, someone who's really been there, someone who's had the 5 signs, done the decades of excruciatingly difficult practice, realized Rigpa, and they may be in that illumined state while they're standing right in front of me. Remember, if you go back and listen to the passage I read, it says at the end, it implies that when you enter into Rigpa, then you radiate from that state into the world. So you radiate what you realize into the world at large, into the world of the senses, and into the normal world. So there's the illumined, realized Buddhist master in front of me in that state. And so what? So what? Is that sacred? What is sacred about that state? What is sacred about that attainment? What is sacred about enlightenment? Now, this is just my humble opinion. I'm just a mere dog Zen acolyte. But to me, what is sacred is what is alive. And intelligence is a property of what lives. And life is a property of intelligence. Now, you can look far and wide in these Buddhist texts and in the extensive works of Buddhist scholars such as Wayman and Gwenther for passages which use the word life or intelligence, and you will barely find any. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of books by Gwenther, and he was extremely meticulous and elaborate in his jargon. He tried to incorporate a lot of existential jargon into his translation of the noetics and the ontology and deontology of Tantric Buddhism. And if you look in the index of 5 or 6 of his books, there's hardly any incidence at all of the word life or intelligence. So here is my closing question, and again, my final point. If the realization of this state of Rigpa and this radiant presence in the clear light cannot demonstrably be shown to have the properties of life or the properties of intelligence, then what's the point of being there? And on what grounds would anyone extend good faith to a realized master such that that individual would be taken as an object of reverence and even taken as someone whose opinions are respected? You know, the Dalai Lama has a YouTube channel, and you can see these short clips of him sitting there with a gaggle of teenage girls, giving them advice on their emotional problems. Oh, what do? I have negative emotions. I have bad feelings. Who says that the Dalai Lama, presuming that he has realized Rigpa fully, has anything better to say than anyone else to those teenage girls? Anything better than what I could say, and I could tell them a lot about sex and love. I have the qualifications. Does the Dalai Lama or any other Buddhist master have the experiential qualifications to talk to anyone about love and sex and personal problems? And why grant good faith to Buddhists on the grounds that they do have something to say? It doesn't make any sense when you just sit there and look at it. When you sit there and gnaw that bone for a while, it just doesn't make any sense. At least it doesn't make any sense to me. I see no reason whatsoever for such presumptions. I see no reason whatsoever to extend good faith to a realized Buddhist master regarding any subject whatsoever except the presumed attainment of that master. And even then, I am compelled to ask, what does the accomplished master have to show as demonstrable proof of enlightenment? For instance, how can the accomplished master educate the world in anything other than the topic of Buddhism itself? There, in a soundbite, is the Maitreya challenge.